From card-carrying horror films to mainstream studio comedies, these movies all dared to leave the audience feeling off from the very start, such that anybody still watching couldn't really complain about the transgressive places the story went from there. It's little surprise then that the majority of these films are relatively polarizing. In the very least, they let you know what they were about right away. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 opening movie scenes that wanted to make you uncomfortable. Number 10. God Bless America. Bob Goldthwait's black comedy God Bless America begins, as it means to go on, by aggressively provoking the audience on their standards of taste and what they're able to consider funny. Joel Murray stars as Frank Murdoch, a middle-aged man who has lost his patience with America's descent into stupidity, and so decides to take matters into his own hands in the most ultimate way possible. The film kicks off with Frank complaining about his neighbors, a couple who keep him awake with their loud TV, inane banter, and relentlessly screaming baby. Despite his repeated requests for them to mind their noise levels due to his migraines and insomnia, they don't listen. Frank then states a desire to kill them, at which point the scene shifts to him breaking into their apartment with a shotgun and blasting the boyfriend dead. The girlfriend then begs him to stop, even lifting her own baby in front of her face as a shield, and when she then throws the baby into the air, Frank opens fire, decorating the room and both himself and the mother with the baby's bloody remains. After a moment of gleeful celebration, though, the scene shifts back to Frank in bed, still being kept awake by the screaming baby. The scene was a fantasy, but all the same, showing a baby getting shotgunned into red paste in the first 2 minutes of a movie is certainly a way to weed out the pearl clutchers. Number 9. Midsommar. If you were worried that Ari Aster's second feature would struggle to match his stunning directorial debut Hereditary, he proved in Midsommar's traumatic opening sequence that this wouldn't be the case. The film opens with our protagonist Dani leaving a voicemail for her parents that she received a concerning email from her mentally ill sister Terry. A distraught Dani then calls her boyfriend Christian for support, though he brushes off her worries and insists that her sister is surely fine. But that's sadly not the case. She calls him back moments later screaming in grief, as it's revealed that Terry has not only committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning, but also taken their parents with her. And Aster certainly makes us share Dani's trauma. The visual of firefighters breaking into Dani's parents' home, and especially the sight of Terry's lifeless face with a tube duct taped to her mouth, is one that few watching will ever forget. This is without getting into Dani's anguished wails after learning the news, which, much like Toni Collette's grief-stricken breakdown in Hereditary, are so ugly and unpleasant as to feel brutally real. This isn't Hollywood crying. It certainly set a tone of pervading dread for the 2+ hours to come. Number 8. There's Something About Mary. There's Something About Mary boasts one of the most infamously cringe-inducing opening set pieces in the history of mainstream Hollywood comedy. A penile injury gag so viscerally unnerving you needn't have a penis to develop sympathy pains. In a traumatic and surprisingly lengthy opening sequence which sets up the rest of the movie, high schooler Ted Stroman is preparing to go to prom with the girl of his dreams, Mary Jensen. He heads to the bathroom in Mary's house to pee, but after getting distracted, ends up trapping his balls in his trouser zip. An excruciating sequence follows as Mary's parents enter the bathroom to try and help a panicking Ted out, and before long the police and fire department are also on the scene lending their expertise. After a cop pulls the zip down, we smash cut to Ted being removed from the house on a gurney by paramedics, all while the entire neighborhood looks on. And somehow, worst of all, Ted never got the opportunity to take Mary to prom. Few comedies would have the self-confidence to invest in such a prolonged setup and payoff for a gag, but in the case of There's Something About Mary, it left viewers the world over feeling as queasy as they were amused. Number 7. The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Yorgos Lanthimos' expertly crafted thriller The Killing of a Sacred Deer revolves around a cardiac surgeon, Stephen, who befriends a teenage boy, Martin, with an unexpected connection to his past. And in typically left-field fashion, Lanthimos opens his film by immediately establishing Stephen's line of work in the most discomforting and confronting way imaginable. The first shot of the film is a close-up glimpse of a beating human heart in the middle of surgery, as Lanthimos' camera slowly glides upwards while surgeons continue the operation. After what feels like an eternity, in reality it's about 90 seconds, the shot finally ends and the movie's title appears. As human beings with beating hearts, we all have an innate biological aversion to seeing our insides on the outside, and Lanthimos exploits this fact so perfectly. And if you at least soothe yourself with the belief that Lanthimos simply used an incredibly lifelike prop to execute the scene, during an appearance on Hot Ones, Colin Farrell confirmed that Lanthimos actually filmed a real quadruple bypass. More to the point, Farrell himself was also in attendance and called the experience of watching the surgery very intense and upsetting. Number 6. Shame. In the hands of a less astute and considerate filmmaker, one can imagine sex addiction drama Shame striking a very different chord indeed, where a warts-and-all examination of compulsive sexuality becomes titillating and even exploitative. Yet, right from Shame's opening scene, director Steve McQueen ensures to drain all possible appeal from the film's frank depiction of sex, reimagining these encounters as the soulless, passionless transactions of a man driven by the sheer need to do it. Shame's stunningly ominous 9-minute opening presents a montage of sex-addicted protagonist Brandon as he goes about his daily routine. He wakes up, commutes to work, leers at women on the train, has sex with sex workers back at his apartment, and ignores voicemail messages from his concerned sister Sissy. The scene culminates in a wordless exchange between Brandon and an attractive woman he's been making eyes with on the train to work. She's receptive at first before becoming uncomfortable at the situation, flashing her engagement ring and then disappearing into the crowd while Brandon chases after her in vain. It's a brilliantly effective sequence in both confirming Brandon's predatory nature and also how little genuine pleasure he seems to derive from sex. It is simply a compulsion. McQueen impressively makes Brandon's sex-filled life seem hollow and ugly, a tone which follows through for the rest of the film. Number 5. I Saw the Devil. Kim Ji-woon's 2010 thriller I Saw the Devil offers up one of the most mesmerizingly disturbing opening sequences of all time, even for the standards of a serial killer movie. The film begins with a pregnant woman, Ju-yeon, waiting for a tow truck in the snow after getting a flat tire. She soon encounters a man who promises to change the tire, and when she rebuffs him, he responds by smashing her car window and bludgeoning her unconscious with a hammer. The scene then shifts to Ju-yeon waking up naked in this serial killer's lair, covered in a plastic sheet. She watches as he prepares her for dismemberment while he comments that her soft skin will make her easy to chop up. She desperately begs him to spare her, explaining that she's pregnant, only for him to remorselessly decapitate her with a hatchet seconds later. We're then forced to watch as he dismembers the rest of her body, cleans up the scene and scatters her body parts, only for a boy to soon enough discover one of her ears in a field. It's easy to imagine a Hollywood version of this opening being far more restrained and tasteful, yet Kim Ji-woon refuses to shy away from his antagonist's sociopathic detached brutality. It's incredibly upsetting to watch and ensures we're just as keen to see the killer get his just desserts as Ju-yeon's vengeful fiancé. Number 4. Vox Lux. The trailers for Brady Corbett's 2018 film Vox Lux primarily sold it as a drama about a troubled pop star Celeste, while largely ignoring its incredibly jolting and disturbing opening scene, and in a cynical marketing sense, with good reason. Before we get to the pop star portion of the movie, it begins with a 2000 set prologue in which a young Celeste is at school when an active shooter assaults the campus. The boy guns down Celeste's teacher and informs Celeste that he's already killed lots of other people around the school. Celeste nevertheless speaks calmly to him, trying to talk him down from causing any more harm. But just as it seems like she's succeeded, Celeste is shot in the shoulder. When a SWAT team enters the classroom moments later, we see that the shooter has gunned down the entire class before turning the gun on himself. Celeste is ultimately one of the few surviving victims, but for a film marketed primarily as an oddball drama about an eccentric artist, nobody expected it to kick off with something so brutal. That Corbett films it with such brilliantly clinical detachment just makes it that much more chilling. Number 3. Widows. Steve McQueen's tightly wound thriller Widows opens not with a fraught shootout, well, not immediately, but a decidedly more unexpected sight. The first minute of Widows is nothing more than a shot of our protagonist Veronica passionately making out with her husband Harry. Another way to put it might be that Liam Neeson is basically devouring Viola Davis's face, and rather than cut away once their relationship has been established, McQueen lingers on it for an amount of time clearly intended to make the viewer uncomfortable. It's such an intimate moment, captured with such dispassionate objectivity by McQueen's stationary camera, that it feels like we're intruding on an intensely private moment. Beyond that, it's pretty much the polar opposite of what we expect from a screen kiss involving two bona fide A-listers. It's not tasteful and restrained, but sloppy in a way that feels considerably more real rather than staged for the camera. One suspects that McQueen also intentionally chose to linger on the kiss because it was between a white man and a black woman, given that there's still a depressing lack of interracial romance in Hollywood. By opening his film with this image, he immediately gave us something unexpected in several ways, while also prodding any bigots who happen to be watching. Number 2. Kids. Larry Clark's extremely controversial 1995 drama Kids follows a group of New York teenagers as they explore their burgeoning sexuality, and Clark throws viewers right in the deep end from the very first scene. This scene involves a boy, Telly, coercing a 12-year-old girl into having sex with him. The girl makes it abundantly clear that she's not at all sure about it, but as an older, more experienced partner, Telly easily manages to pressure her into agreeing. Clark then lingers on the scene as the pair have sex, and while the girl complains about the pain of losing her virginity, we're subjected subjected to a skin-crawling voiceover from Telly, who details how much he loves having sex with virginal girls. The crushing sense of reality to the scene, that this is precisely how older boys take advantage of young girls, lends it a stomach-churning quality. And much like Widows, it feels off-puttingly intimate, accentuated by Clarke's unvarnished visual style, which grants the scene an even greater air of docu-style authenticity. Number 1. Irreversible. Like just about every Gaspar Noé movie, Irreversible doesn't pretend to be anything that it isn't from the opening bell. Kicking off with a bewildering opening title sequence filled with flashing, colourful credits played in reverse to discordant choral music. The film's 20-minute opening sequence, which, with its scenes being shown in reverse order, is actually the ending, involves two men, Marcus and Pierre, entering a gay BDSM club in search of a psychopath called Latenia, which I could have just said wrong and I do apologise if I did. Beyond the sheer bewilderment of the sequence being broken up into small scenes which play out in reverse order, Noé employs intentionally unsettling sound and imagery to increase the audience's sense of dread. During their trip through the club, the camera continually spins around in disorientating fashion, while the sound of the club is enhanced by low-frequency background noise intended to induce anxiety and even nausea in some viewers. And to top it all off, this sequence climaxes with Pierre beating who he thinks is Latenia to death with a fire extinguisher, an exchange which Noé lingers on in grotesquely grisly detail. If you're still with Noé and his story at this point, he's got you. But understandably, it proved enough for many, even at its Cannes Film Festival premiere, where a reported 250 people walked out and 24 required medical attention from fainting. So, mission accomplished, I guess. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss a What Culture video. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.